Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of the rare cases of a brilliant game coming along that unfortunately has too many little issues in it. Issues that some will completely overlook because of how good the rest of the product is. This is a game that I can see some people gushing over, saying it's one of the best games of all time, sitting alongside Red Dead Redemption 2 or God of War 2018. But also a game where I can see people saying it's just a great game. I say this because that's much of what the reception in the last year has been towards the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Selling a staggering 3.5 million copies in just 3 days upon its release, and becoming the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive to date, only being overthrown by The Last of Us Part 2. It also sits at a very respectable 87 on Metacritic, with reviews ranging between 8 out of 10 and 10 out of 10. Final Fantasy VII would go on to be nominated for 6 awards at the Game Awards, including Game of the Year, and would go on to win the Best Music category and Best Role-Playing Game. So it's no secret that the majority of people love this game, and many screaming its praises as a masterpiece. But I don't think it's a masterpiece. I sit firmly in the group of people saying this is a great game with some pretty obvious flaws. However, none of the issues here are fatal flaws, not by a long shot. They're just disappointments or could easily be classified as bloat. See, where the original Final Fantasy VII takes roughly 30 to 40 hours to complete and spans multiple different locations, I'm told as I haven't actually played it, the remake's runtime is equivalent to the original while only covering the Midgar section of the story, that being about 30% of the original campaign. Final Fantasy VII Remake has largely fleshed out the story of the original, adding many new locations and scenes. It has also added side missions to help build up the world and use more of its open spaces. Unfortunately, this is where much of the bloat comes from, as I believe they've spread this section of the story too thin and put in too many disappointing aspects in order to pad out the runtime. But the parts that matter the most and have the most impact, story, characters and gameplay, are all amazing and honestly come very close to that masterpiece label that has been thrown onto this game. Coming into Final Fantasy VII Remake, I knew nothing about the story or the world. All I'd heard was the combat being somewhere between real-time and turn-based, and that really interested me. I've never been a fan of traditional turn-based combat, as I find it excruciatingly boring and not engaging in the slightest. So you can imagine my surprise when I finally picked this up and started playing it, and how much I loved this combat system. It's extremely fun and looks fucking incredible. The amount of pure chaos happening on screen in some of the battles is straight up stunning. Starting out, the thing that stumped me the most was the steep learning curve, and when I say steep, I mean steep. I haven't struggled this much with a combat system since playing Dark Souls 1 for the first time. Now, I'm not saying this is Souls hard, but I died a lot in this game. I chalk that up to me not understanding the hybrid combat system they have in place here, and not having much experience in the turn-based genre. Because although what you're seeing on screen looks like a hack and slash, this is 100% a turn-based combat system in disguise. Okay, so how does combat actually work? I'm going to go through and break down all the basics in order to hopefully help someone out there wanting to play this. Firstly, on the outset, there are 3 difficulties. Classic sets the combat difficulty to easy, but also automates the player character's basic attacks and blocking, leaving you just to focus on casting abilities. This is also the easiest difficulty the game offers. Next is easy, which removes the automated basic attacks and blocking from the previous difficulty, but otherwise is the same. And then finally, there's medium, which plays the same as easy, except it's more challenging. At the beginning of the game, you'll have access to Cloud, who wields an assortment of massive swords, able to fight in 2 different stances. Operator stance being used for quick, low damage strikes, giving you the opportunity to move around the battlefield at a rapid pace. Then there's Punisher mode, which is a much slower, stronger hitting stance that opens the ability to parry hits on successful blocks. It also majorly decreases your movement speed. These 2 combat modes are what Cloud will have for the entire game, and besides the minor changes each bring, the options you have available are largely the same. Switching between these different modes and attacking enemies in real time by either pressing or holding down square in order to pull off different attacks is the hack and slash part of the combat. This can largely be explained as filling in the downtime between abilities that traditional turn-based combat has. By adding this real-time element to the mix helps to keep you engaged in every fight and gives the combat a much more personal feel to it, as you can express yourself not only through abilities, but different stances, parrying, dodging, and positioning. While fighting in real time, you'll be building up your ATB gauge, which is used for your abilities. These abilities are the turn-based aspects of gameplay, and where most of your real damage will come from. See, while basic attacks will slowly chip away at the enemy's health, you won't be doing any significant amount of damage, whereas each character's abilities hit very hard and can easily one-shot many of the trash mobs. Spells also consume your ATB gauge, but will also use a portion of your MP. Spells are basically the same as abilities, but spells can be used by any character through the use of certain materia, which are the central customization items. Lastly, there are two final things that are used quite rarely. First is a limit gauge, which is used for extra special character abilities that can only be accessed this way. The limit gauge is filled up by dealing and taking damage, but this can be changed with certain equipment equipped. Then later in the game, you'll gain access to certain Pokemon that can be summoned to help you out. This is kinda like the oh shit I need help ability. Okay, that was a little long-winded, but that's the basics of the combat and what you'll be doing for a solid third of the time you are playing. Now let me tell you why this is one of the best combat systems I've ever played. Right off the bat, in the very first fight, you'll notice how fucking cool this looks. Cloud is a badass. The way he looks, the way he holds himself, the way you can tell he just doesn't give a shit, the way he's animated, the weapon he decides to use, it's just incredible. Every swing comes so rapidly, but feels like there's so much weight behind it. This is even enhanced by the particle effect system they have on display here. Each time your weapon makes contact with an enemy, white and gold sparks spew everywhere. Time is also a major factor in why combat looks phenomenal. Whether it's when you defeat an enemy and the killing blow holds for a brief moment, or when you execute an ability, Cloud will hold the end of the animation, allowing you to take in all the visual spectacle, even if it's just for a split second in time. All four playable characters follow the same visual flow, whether it's Barrett's over-the-top animation with his overcharge attack, Tifa's rapid and never-ending punches, or Aerith's attacks releasing an exaggerated amount of particles. Every character here plays in a very unique way, featuring different playstyles, abilities, and specials that all look as equally impressive as each other. Combat also sounds great. Every action is conveyed nicely back to you, as Cloud's sword is pitch perfect and Barrett's gun has a meaty, deep sound to it. The score is also relentless during the combat. While not every track landed for me as it did for others, the layering of everything here is what elevates the whole presentation. Character sound effects, enemies, music, environmental effects, and dialogue all layer on top of each other, trying to immerse you into these battles. But most importantly is the actual combat itself and how it plays removed from any audio-visual presentation. I'm incredibly happy to say this is magnificent, and I now regard this as one of the greatest combat systems of all time, sitting alongside Bloodborne, Hollow Knight, and God of War. The extent of player freedom you have here in combat is astounding. Each character feeling like they have a near endless amount of choices in any given moment, with all their unlockable abilities that are made through using different weapons, or the abundant amount of spells thanks to the materia system which simply slots into your gear, giving you either passive or active spells. Then there's the real-time elements in play. Do you block or dodge? Do you try to attack all the weak enemies first or go straight for the strongest? Do you play Cloud in a fast and agile way, or like a brute, hitting hard but deliberately slow? What happens when you give this much player expression, but add unforgiving enemies into the mix? Where you get a deeply rewarding, satisfying, and consistently captivating combat system. Final Fantasy VII is a hard game, and it can be made insufferable if you don't meet it on its terms. Playing on medium, if you don't use everything available to you, you're going to struggle. I know this because I struggled a lot. It took me hours to figure out what was required of me in order to succeed. The very first boss battle took me over 10 minutes because Cloud was down before the boss was even below half health, forcing me to slog through the fight as Barrett, or later when I was fighting some rats for a mission in the Sector 7 slums. I died here more times than I'm comfortable saying because I wasn't blocking, I wasn't switching between the characters enough, and I wasn't using the enemy's weaknesses against them. This combat section is going on for too long, but just know that this combat system is near perfect, and I haven't even mentioned the insane amount of variety in both enemies and bosses, something that is sorely missed in a lot of games. Or the depth of the RPG elements through different weapons, equipment, upgrades, and materia. There's a reason this won Best RPG at the Game Awards. But I'll finish up with the combat there. It looks and sounds great, feels great to play, and has a near endless amount of depth through its steep learning curve and ability to master each individual enemy and boss. Hats off to Square Enix for what they were able to achieve here, because this is a true feat in combat design.
That didn't need to be so messy.
Let's continue with the great and talk about the story. I'm going to be very spoiler free with this section because knowing close to nothing is the best way to experience this game. Like I said earlier, coming into this I knew nothing about the story, so you can imagine my surprise 15 minutes in and realising that we're in the shoes of this world's terrorists. You play as Cloud Strife, a mercenary who takes a job working for Avalanche, which is led by Barrett. He believes that the Mako energy being harvested from the planet by Shinra reactors is causing harm to the planet. In order to stop this, they plan to bomb multiple Mako reactors across Midgar.
You do realize what Mako is, don't you? Mako is the lifeblood of our world. The planet bleeds green like you and me bleed red. The hell you think's gonna happen when it's all gone, huh? Answer me!
Midgar is the metal city that houses all of this, being run completely off of Marco energy. Cloud and the Avalanche gang will traverse Midgar in this 30-hour campaign to do a multitude of things and meet up with an abundance of characters. That's all I'll say about the basic plot of the game, as anything more will spoil some surprises. At the core of the story is the characters. This is very much a character piece, with conflict just guiding them from one place to another. The Avalanche gang here are all great. They all have their unique personalities and quirks. Although Cloud is the most interesting and my favourite character, he doesn't overshadow any of the others, each of them getting their own time to shine and having their big moments. This game is just written really well. It's heartwarming, it's intriguing, it's surprisingly funny. Many cutscenes I was either smiling ear to ear or legitimately laughing. The climactic moments also aren't screwing around. This isn't a story where the good guys are always triumphant. There are many moments here where our heroes lose. This made the story even more impressive to me, as I was not expecting something this deep and real. Can I quickly say that Sephiroth is so fucking cool? This has got to be one of my favourite video game villains of all time. He's intimidating as hell, his design is whack, and he does not fuck around. There's a few cutscenes here which gave me chills because of what they were portraying. Coming from someone who has no nostalgia to this universe at all, that is a very impressive feat as a remake. While Final Fantasy VII doesn't have the writing prowess of Red Dead 2, it is very impressive as very few games hit this level of storytelling. I think what separates this and Red Dead 2 is the amount of anime infused in this and the characters, and the ramifications that inevitably brings. If you don't watch a whole lot of anime, myself included, then some of the tropes here will land and others will not. But the opposite is also true. I suspect if you fucking love anime or have nostalgia to the original, this story will be near perfect for you. What wasn't perfect for me though was the sheer amount of padding in this campaign. This is probably my most controversial opinion in this review. See, Final Fantasy VII took me 32 hours to complete the game and see the credits roll. I did every side mission available, which are really boring by the way, but I'll get back to them, and I did most of the other optional stuff. So I know by going through all the side content, I added roughly 10 hours or so onto my runtime, but this story, the actual chapters themselves, should have been cut down by at least 5 hours, if not more. There is so much padding here. There's padding with the side mission design, there's padding with very questionable minigames and puzzles, there's padding with the reuse of areas, there's padding with useless platforming detours, and there's padding with ludonarrative dissonance. Forget that you just heard that term because I'm not ready to talk about that yet, but instead look at these two sections in a chapter that I'll not spoil. There's a keycard the crew needs to get, so you have to climb over these chandeliers in order to get there, but oh no, the chandelier breaks. Now you have to climb around the environment to get back up to the chandelier, but this isn't a platformer. There's no platforming here. You're just pressing forward and the game does it itself. Who is this for? This is a 5-minute section that has nothing in it. No plot development, no combat, no interesting visuals. It has nothing. Next, what happens right after this is climbing 59 flights of stairs, something that took me 10 minutes. 10 minutes of nothingness. Of course I know this is a joke and skippable, but why? Why was time wasted on this? And these are just two examples. This type of padding is everywhere, particularly in the second half of the story. Okay, moving on to ludonarrative dissonance, a term often used by people to make them sound smarter than they actually are. I'll keep this short, but once I noticed this, it really grinded away at me. There is not a single human boss you fight in this that actually dies. You win in the gameplay, and then you lose in the cutscene. This happens every time. At every turn this happens, and even has some very detrimental causes to our heroes. You kill thousands of soldiers, animals, and robots in this game, but you can't kill anyone in a cutscene. It's silly and quite disappointing considering what else has been done here. Cutscenes not matching gameplay is nothing new on this medium, and I honestly chalk this up to being a remake of a 20-year-old game. Therefore, I accepted it and moved on. However, this story is great. It's a relatively tight and deep narrative and holds its own very well. I just can't see how it wouldn't have been better if it was a few hours shorter. To finish off this review, I'll cover a bunch of notable stuff. I've already mentioned most of the great things Final Fantasy VII Remake offers, the gameplay, the story, the characters, and the world. So this will be a few little things that I hope get ironed out in the next game, or maybe even removed completely. First up, and what encapsulates almost everything in the game, is the linear and boring level design. There's no way around this issue. The level design here is one of the worst things about the game. It's just corridor after corridor, and these locations are dressed up as much as possible, but it's never inventive, and it's so restrictive to move around. It takes so long to get around anywhere in this world, whether it's the long corridors you'll be running down over and over again, or the excruciatingly slow sections where you squeeze through the environment clearly masking a loading screen. If you decide to complete the side missions, you'll notice the bland level design even more as you run back and forth accepting and completing them. But you'll also notice that these side missions are just MMO style quests, being asked to clear out rats from a particular area, or searching for lost cats, or clearing out a mini-boss. They're boring and do not match that of the intelligent writing of the main quests.
This sucks.
Continuing with the missions is the bizarre lack of quality in lip sync here. It's downright awful at times, looking like it's a game from the early 2000s.
Heard you took out some were-rats, which is nice and all, but the job was to wipe out the Doom Rats.
And this is contrasted terribly because the campaign has really good lip sync, and then all of a sudden the game has lowered its standards. When starting the game, you'll notice how great this can look. Certain interiors look stunning with some high fidelity textures. Better yet are the fantastic character models, some of the best looking character models in any game period. But once you get to the more open areas of the game, particularly where all the side missions take place, it gets really rough. Many textures suddenly become super low resolution, honestly looking like they're from a PlayStation 3 game. Pop-in becomes extremely noticeable with some textures and character models out in the open world. Even better yet is some textures just never pop in, like this door, which is a door you happen to see a lot, just never loads. Like, how did this get to release? And if you're wondering if this is a PlayStation 4 hard drive issue, I can say it isn't, because this is PlayStation 5 footage. Final Fantasy VII has some really weird graphical issues, and it's most apparent during all the side content. It's like they misbudgeted the project or added side missions so late in development that they didn't have time to finish it. I do hope with the future PlayStation 5 release, and maybe even a proper PlayStation 5 upgrade that runs at 60 FPS, these texture issues can be sorted out. And that's the Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's an incredibly unique game that I wish I cherished more at the beginning, because I did not expect to like it as much as I did. But I cannot deny the fact that while the story and combat is some of the best in any game I've ever played, about 10 hours of my playtime was unengaging, and I just wish it wasn't there. Because if this was just 20 hours of the best combat encounters and best story moments, this game would fit the label of masterpiece for me. Nevertheless, while I've never played a single game in this franchise before, Final Fantasy VII Remake has been an amazing entrance into this world, and I cannot wait to see what future installments hold.
Satisfied?